All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Elevate Your Impact. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Hopefully the sound is coming through. And we are going to get started. You all are in for a treat today. So you should hopefully be able to see the welcome screen. And on there's two sections to that. So first and foremost, thank you all for being here. And I know a couple other folks are getting logged in right now, but that's not a problem at all. And so a couple of reminders for today's session. Just want to remind you that there will be space for some small group discussions towards the latter part of today's session. So if you are in a place where you can come off mute to be able to participate in the breakout rooms, that's great. Totally understand if you're on a mobile device or otherwise not in a place to do so, but you are still welcome to be here. And again, that'll be towards the end of today's session. Also encourage you to have a pen and paper handy or another way of taking notes. If there's anything you hear today that you want to write down and reflect on, definitely invite you to do that. Now, we're going to try something here to get us warmed up. We have some new technology, at least it's new to me. We're going to try what is called a whiteboard. And so this is an opportunity where you can click on the link to then be able to access the whiteboard. So let me place that link in the chat. And again, if you are on a mobile device or otherwise not able to click on the link, that's okay. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time on this. But if you are at your computer, I invite you to click on the link, and you should be able to see what is called a whiteboard. And on that whiteboard, you're going to see a bunch of sticky notes. Now, you have the ability to zoom in and zoom out. There's a menu at the bottom of the screen. So you can click on one of the sticky notes, and I invite you to place your name and whatever city department or county agency you may be representing, and we'll get a sense of who's who in today's meeting. So we'll give you a few moments to do that. Feel free to explore the different options there on the menu, but what we're looking for are one of the sticky notes with your name and your department or agency. And again, if you're otherwise on a device where you can't click the link, that's okay. We won't stay on this long. Excellent. I see a flurry of little arrows on my screen. So glad to see everybody here, and hopefully the technology is working out for you. But if not, that's okay too, because we will be diving into our session here very shortly. Excellent. All right, I see plenty of city departments and county agencies being represented. That's excellent. Welcome to everybody. So, and feel free to please continue if you haven't finished with your sticky note there on the whiteboard. But I do invite you to turn your attention back to the main webinar screen, and we will get started on today's Elevate Your Impact Lunch and Learn series. So today we're going to talk about the trust factor. So trust, it's one of those things that, well, we're fairly familiar with trust. I mean, we get a sense, of trust in our work life and trust in our life outside of work. So, I don't want to necessarily dive too deep yet, but I want to invite you all to open your minds to trust, the importance of it, and we're gonna start to really learn about how we can apply trust to our work lives here in the city and the county. Before we get too far, I do want to do some formal introductions. My name is RJ Vega. I'm the Culture and Organizational Development Manager here in Human Resources, and joined today by Christy Hernandez. She is the Learning and Organizational Development Division Leader. And so she's the MVP for today because she's running a lot of the technology. And if there's any issues with tech or anything, you can either send a chat or let Christy know, and she can work with you to try to resolve that. And I'll be doing the majority of the facilitation of the slides, with Christy handling a lot of the behind the scenes work today. So thank you, Christy, for that. So today's trust factor agenda. What are we going to talk about? Well, buckle in. It's going to be a fun and exciting ride. We're going to talk about what is trust and how is that present or perhaps not present in some of our workplace settings and or outside of work as well. We're going to examine a trust formula. So there's a formula that can help us apply the lessons of trust and how to extend trust as well as receive trust. And there's a framework here to help us navigate these different interactions, these different situations, these different relationships that we may have. And we'll zero in and focus on 3 key behaviors that can help build and strengthen trust in our workplace and in our lives. And like I mentioned at the beginning of the broadcast, at the tail end of today's session, there will be an opportunity for breakout discussions. So again, for those who are able to come off mute, then that would be the opportunity to do so. But more than anything, we definitely invite you to put any sort of comments or chat or questions in the chat. We want to see some movement. If there's emojis throughout what we're talking about, if something resonates with you, please feel free to react. And as well, if you have any questions, please do engage. So let's get started with today's topic of trust. Trust, we deal with it all the time. So many areas of our lives, personally, professionally, socially, and here in the workplace. Trust, it's one of those things that you can start to sense when it's there, but also if you start to sense maybe some hiccups or problems in your workplace, trust could very well be at the heart of whatever that issue or problem may be. So utilizing the chat or the emoji or reaction features here on the Teams, my question to you is, how many of you out there have had or experienced a communication problem within a team you may have been a part of? You ever experience a communication problem? Something's just not landing or just not understanding one another? Feel free to throw a reaction, throw something in the chat, because here's what happens is that, you might identify, hey, our team maybe there's a communication problem here on the team. And you think, gosh, maybe we should reach out to our friends at HR and maybe brainstorm some sort of a communication sort of training. Well, what if I told you that in many cases, what could appear and feel like some sort of a communication problem, maybe there's a teamwork or team building problem, actually it's a problem rooted in trust, and it manifests itself in a different way, whether through communication, whether through sense of team building and unity, because trust is one of those things that is foundational. It's foundational when you have many human beings coexisting on a team, and there's probably some sort of a goal or a challenge that you want to work on. But so what you got to do is, and it's funny because I saw this study that as I was preparing for today's session, and it actually said that 73% of workplace issues stem from problems with trust. Okay, so I want to lead with that just because it is very foundational to many other issues that may come up when we're working as a team. So I know we all have these different experiences with trust, different relationships here with the topic of trust. So I want to hear from you all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, again, place a link in the chat to a different whiteboard. And what I'm going to ask from everybody, for those who can click on the link, I'll place it in the chat right here, right now. If you want to click on there, I'm going to pose a question to you, and I want your input. So the question that I have, and if you can't click on the link, that's okay. You can maybe reflect on this on your end in your mind. But the question is, I want you to think of somebody that you trust. Could be somebody, you know, in a workplace setting, could be somebody outside of a workplace setting. So you think of someone you trust, and I want you to think about, and for those who click on the sticky notes, why do you trust that person? You don't need to put a name, you don't even need to put your name, but when you think of someone you trust, why do you trust them? We'll give you a few moments to either type that out or reflect on that. Excellent. I see a flurry of little arrows on my whiteboard screen, starting to see some excellent insights. So when you think of someone you trust, why do you trust them? All right, and for those who are still typing, please feel free to continue finishing your thoughts on either your digital sticky note. But what I'm going to do is I want to see what you all are sharing here, and I'll read it to the group here. So let me stop sharing my screen, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to, and you can all look at the main screen right here for the Teams webinar, but I'm going to take a look at some of the feedback that you all have started to place. All right, so for those of you who weren't able to even click on the link, this is an opportunity to see the whiteboard feature. But, you know, we got some insights about, okay, because I trust them because they've never let me down, ever. Ooh, that's big time. Honesty, they're transparent, direct, candid, wholehearted. Wow, I like that. That person has been honest with me even when we did not agree. Interesting. I like that one. They've proven themselves to be trustworthy by their actions and their words. Okay. All right. They have a long history of consistent results. Ooh, very insightful. They keep their promises and stick to their word. Okay. Excellent. I see some excellent other ones too. History of proven trust, integrity. They have my best interests at heart and would not do anything to intentionally hurt me. So what I'm observing is that we do have a pretty clear idea, you know, how trust can be shown to us in different settings from different individuals. So what I'll do is I will go back to sharing my slides here, and thank you all for putting the input on there. And so we have this this relationship with trust. Now, a lot of us have that close experience, and for today's session, we are going to actually have a brief introduction to this book from Stephen M.R. Covey, and the book is called The Speed of Trust. Is anyone familiar with The Speed of Trust? If so, throw something in the chat if you've either read the book or you've maybe seen some different excerpts from it, or maybe even attended some sort of a training in the past built around this. But The Speed of Trust is going to be one of our, we're going to give you a little taste of some of the content in that. And we actually, and this is kind of cool, we actually have a copy of The Speed of Trust that we're going to give away at the end of today's session. Now, it's one of those things where you must be present to win, so hopefully you can stay through to the end of the session. We're going to randomly pick one person, and they get a copy of The Speed of Trust by Stephen M.R. Covey. So definitely want to invite you to stay tuned to that. And so the reason why we bring this book up is because it does go into deep detail on some of these different topics regarding trust. So you'll hear me refer back to it in a couple different ways and a couple different lessons. But Stephen M.R. Covey, The Speed of Trust, if you are otherwise interested in this, definitely encourage you to check it out. On the screen right now, that is not Stephen M.R. Covey, but that is Mr. Bean. And I put that on there because sometimes, if you're ever like me, I get that sensation, that feeling of, okay, how can I be a little more intentional? How can I be a little more smart in how I would extend trust to somebody? Trust does start from within, right? So we are placing an expectation that the behavior of someone else, that other person, that it's all going to turn out all right. And like you all said on your whiteboard, they have my interest at heart. They want to intentionally do something that could be helpful to me. Now, the hard part though is that it gets complicated because we're placing that expectation on someone else, right? And so with that complexity in mind, the question becomes, how can we navigate that thought of extending trust to someone else, a teammate, coworker, somebody outside of work? Well, going back to the speed of trust and Stephen M.R. Covey, they've actually devised a formula for this. Now, if there's any mathematicians here today, I'm sure you're pretty familiar with formulas. I was not a mathematician, but this formula is very simple yet highly effective. And so what this formula entails, the trust formula, character plus competence equals trust. I'm going to let that sink in for a second. Character and competence equals trust. So when you hear the word character, what comes to mind? Throw something in the chat. What comes to mind for a person's character? Feel free to put a thought. Integrity, okay. Honesty, okay. Excellent. And same for competence. What makes you feel like someone is competent? Throw out a quick thought there in the chat. Yep, the personality, doing the right thing. Okay, I like that. Stephen M.R. Covey says that trust is the confidence born of the character and the competence of a person or an organization. Okay, so it could be a person or an organization. Follow through provides accurate information. Love that. I'm reading the chat again. Reliability, willing to learn. They know stuff, but also know when to say, I don't know. Ooh, important. So yeah, so this can be applicable to us as human beings, but also to the organization that we work for, whether it be the city of Lincoln or whether it be Lancaster County. Now, the opposite, though, the opposite of that confidence is actually what's called suspicion. And when there's suspicion, that could start to sow, seeds of doubt, seeds of uncertainty. But again, focusing on this formula, character and competence equals trust. So I want to put forth another question to you all. And it's a scenario where it's this. Imagine that you must hire someone to babysit your child or to take care of your pet. If you had to choose one element, which is more important? And this is a poll question. Go ahead and throw down what you think is more important, competence or character. Oh, okay. See the responses trickling in. Okay. Excellent. Looking at 44% to 56% with character in the lead. That's pretty down the middle, honestly. So what that tells me, oh, okay. Amy says competence can be taught easier than changing someone's character. Ooh, interesting. Okay. Good point, Amy. Excuse me. But yeah, what that shows me is that competence and character in that formula both are important in shaping that sense of trust, right? And yeah, there's some differences there. To kind of go a layer deeper, and this is not a poll question, but this is something that you can respond to in the chat. If either character or competence are lacking, even a little bit, how would that affect trust? Thinking of that example of the babysitter or the dog sitter, if their character or their competence were lacking even a little bit, how does that affect trust? Okay, reduces it, decreases it, doubt starts to come up. Start to say, well, geez, maybe this person might not be the best person to take care of my two little poodles. I got two poodles at home, and they pretty much run the household. So they have a strict schedule on how they like things and when they want things. So, but yes, exactly. Y'all are spot on. Opens up the door to doubt. Question, who they might be. Are they the right person for this particular task or what you're asking for? So when we go deeper into the topic of trust, we want to really get to what's the core, what's holding this all together. Well, going back to the speed of trust, one of the concepts that they share with us is what's called the cores of credibility. So at the very foundation, the very heart of the topic of trust is credibility. And what does that mean? Well, what that means is going back to the competence, that could be the results. Are they delivering those sorts of results? Are they capable of delivering those sorts of results of whatever you're asking from them? Capabilities, do they have the skill set, the knowledge, the focus, time, and everything that they can then deliver in confidence, whatever that particular task or help that you may be asking from them? Going back into the character side of things, the intent of that person, are they genuinely willing to be helpful and add value? Are they there with your good intentions, right? Intention to be helpful to you? And their integrity. I know a couple of you had placed that in the chat. Will they comport themselves in a way that will be helpful to you and help achieve whatever that goal or necessity is? So, in speed of trust and looking at this, the core, again, this core of credibility, this is what holds everything together. This is where everything else stems from in the topic of trust here. And just like with us in our human bodies, right? When our core is strong, then we feel in balance, we feel connected. And same with the team, when that core of trust is strong with these 4 items, then we feel like we're in balance, we're operating in an efficient way. On the flip side, though, when that core is weak, then that's when we can start to struggle. That's when we might not feel stable. We feel disconnected. And that's where some of those suspicions and doubts can start to creep in. So at the core of trust, we have credibility. And here's something else to add to the mix. Credibility by itself can't increase trust. So think about it this way. Something's missing here because you could be working with someone who is highly credible. Your perception is that person is an expert in whatever area or field, that you're having to navigate. They might have a proven track record already, and a lot of peers talk highly about them. But things could also still instantly turn very quickly, and you could lose that trust. So let me ask you the following question. I'm intrigued to learn your responses. So what we're going to do is pose this question to you as a poll question. How trustworthy are you? I want you to be honest and feel free to go with your gut reaction here, but how trustworthy are you? And this is anonymous, so I can't see who says what. A few moments to, on the scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being very trustworthy and 1 being untrustworthy, go ahead and make your response. Okay, looking like it's shaping up to be Okay, about a 4.4 is the average here. So fairly high, fairly trustworthy group that we have here today. That's excellent. So my question, second question here to you all, and this is not a poll, but this is something I want to see from you in the chat. Why did you score that way? Why did you score the way that you did? Because as a group, we're sitting at about 4.4 out of 5. Throw out something in the chat there of why did you score yourself the way you did? Human and not perfect, and good response there, Bridget, and not perfect myself. Feedback from others. Ooh, okay, Hector, I like that. Honesty, integrity, following through with results. Ooh, that's a good one, Autumn. I know my character and competence. Right, Marianne, having empathy and understanding go a long way. Good listener. Ooh, I like that. Typically follow through when I commit to something. High expectations of myself. Excellent. So, we talked about credibility. Oh, good. Some other responses coming in. Credibility, like we said, is an important core to this, but there's something else that's required. And I think you all are starting to allude to this. I always try my best, do my best. And sometimes I can forget, try very hard to make lists, keep myself in check. That's a good one, Ray. Type of person who'll be honest regardless if someone doesn't like my answer, which I've been told I do. Okay, Shannon. So where I'm going with this, and please feel free to keep sending your thoughts in the chat. But where I'm going with this, okay, we said credibility alone won't build that trust, but our behaviors and our actions, and you all alluded to this, the behaviors paired with that credibility is what has the power to improve and increase that sense of trust. So in the book, The Speed of Trust, what they do is they do a deeper dive into 13 behaviors. And these are broken up by character and by competence. And what it does is in the book, they examine how that all comes together to formulate that sense of trust. And if we had more time, would love to dive into all 13. But for today's purposes, what I want to do is kind of focus in, not on all of them, but on 3 key behaviors. So these 3 key behaviors are very, again, foundational, some of the more foundational ones, and really want to explore how they relate to our teams here at work. So the 3 key behaviors that we do want to focus on: demonstrating respect, and I'll go a little bit deeper here in a second. Talking truthfully, and that can be a little intimidating sometimes, but we'll expand on that here shortly. Confront reality. Interesting. Okay, so we'll go into that here in just a moment. But let's start off with something that I feel is crucial for any professional workplace and team. Demonstrating respect. Now, what does that entail? Demonstrate respect. I'm sure y'all kind of know where I'm going with this, but to genuinely care for others, for your peers, your coworkers, and showing and communicating that you do care. So you honor those around you, right? No matter their role. So no matter their role, you are showing that respect to everyone on your team or in your department or agency. Treating everyone with that respect, especially those who can't do anything for you. Now that's interesting, because if you're only showing respect to somebody who can do something for you, that kind of feels more transactional, right? But being able to just baseline, demonstrate that respect for your teammates. And with that as like an early first step, so much more can then be built in terms of strengthening the cohesion of your team or division. Now, what's interesting, as the Speed of Trust alludes to, is that in addition to talking about the particular behavior and how it can foster and build trust in a team or a workplace environment, it also highlights a couple different things. It highlights an opposite behavior and a counterfeit behavior. So I want to talk through that for a second. So we know demonstrating respect, the opposite of doing so is to not respect or to not have concern or acknowledgement for others, right? You're dismissive or you're outright just straight up ignore them. So that's the opposite. Now, what's interesting is there are what are called counterfeit behaviors. Counterfeit is kind of like fake, right? Fake or phony. So in this case, if you fake that respect or that concern, or you're very manipulative in a way where you only show respect for those who can do something for you, that again goes back to being more transactional. You tolerate others, but you don't fully accept others. So I want to let that kind of resonate here and sit for a second, because we see the key behaviors to demonstrate respect. And, we've learned about the concept of respect probably since kindergarten or even earlier, right? But to really think about how that applies to us here as adults in our workplace environment, and to also compare, opposite behaviors, but also those counterfeit behaviors. And yep, I'm looking at the chat here, and Amy, yep, counterfeit seems to be a thing. Sometimes we have to acknowledge that, and it can be a little painful or uncomfortable. But really, with when we talk about trust, we can't just, say that's all like sunshine and rainbows, right? We have to also acknowledge whether it's coming from ourselves or coming from someone else, a behavior intentionally or unintentionally is counterfeit or transactional or fake. So it's something that we really, have to keep in mind as we navigate these topics of trust. And I want to cover the next key behavior, talking truthfully. Talking truthfully. So what does that entail? Well, pretty straightforward. Tell the truth fully. So while that's straightforward, it can be a little tough or intimidating, scary, or complicated at times. But let's be honest. Let's be real. And that might entail using simple language, direct or clear, or being very intentional with the words and phrasing that you're using to let people know clearly, what your perspective is or where you may stand. As we try to move different projects or goals forward, as you all know, with your respective teams, certain adversities come up, stress can start to increase. But again, talking truthfully will help us, even if it's a little tough or scary at times, be able to come out in a way that moves things forward. Okay, so we maintain that sense of trust in one another. Now, to explore the opposite and the counterfeit. So opposite behavior, that's straightforward there. If you're lying or you're deceiving, you're not being truthful, right? Counterfeit behavior, this one's interesting. And if this resonates with anyone, feel free to throw something in the chat there. But spinning something, I don't know if y'all have ever heard somebody kind of spin something, posturing, maybe exaggerating, blowing things out of proportion, or sugarcoating something, or not telling the whole story, withholding information, or just being very flattering or manipulative. So again, putting that into perspective here, talking truthfully, being open and honest, not necessarily like, antagonistic or like, trying to be dominating the conversation, but using clear language that does share your thought or your perspective, and not getting trapped into, counterfeit behaviors, that will start to erode or could potentially sow those seeds of doubt or suspicion into, geez, I don't know if this RJ guy is being very truthful right now. It sounds like he's sugarcoating something. So that is not by any means anything that I personally would want to give that impression. So, a couple phrases that might be helpful too in navigating these sorts of things. In a situation where it might feel a little tougher or challenging to talk truthfully, sometimes some phrases can kind of help get you started, help get you a quick second, quick beat to collect your thoughts. But something you might say could be, here's how I see the situation. Or, I suggest that we do the following. That gives kind of the ownership, like, this is my suggestion. I respect you and I want to be direct with you. Okay, those sorts of things, and you can see, you can figure out what feels comfortable for you in that situation. But again, it's that clarity. It's a little bit of ownership from your end too, of this is where I stand, or this is what I want to communicate to you. And then the last behavior that we want to examine for today, confronting reality. So, confront reality. And again, this can be a little tough, a little scary sometimes, depending on the situation. But confronting reality is taking the issues head on, even the undiscussables, the stuff that might be uncomfortable, the stuff that it might be tempting not to touch that topic or address that. But yes, you acknowledge the unsaid and you address the difficult things directly. And even though it may be difficult right there in that moment, and even in the short term, if you can approach that with that sense of integrity and like we talked about with character and competence, at the very least, you, your teammates, peers, those around you will know that this is coming with a sense of trust, right? You're doing this with a sense of trust. Now, the opposite behaviors. Ignore reality, act as though it doesn't exist, or be in denial. I'm not gonna touch that topic. I won't address that. So that's the opposite. The counterfeit behavior is you pretend to confront that reality, but you actually evade it, you sidestep it. So you might acknowledge, hey, there's a problem, there's an issue, but you are not really doing anything to address it, to work through it, to collaborate with others to try to find a resolution to it, if there is one. So again, a couple phrases that might be helpful to kind of, in that situation, help you just take a beat to collect your thoughts. You might very well say, okay, I want to get real. I want to be real in this conversation, be open and honest. Or you might say something like, what are you not saying that needs to be said? Or you might even, just be very direct yourself and ask that person to please be very direct with me. So request that they be direct with you. Okay, that gives them the liberty to then be direct with you, and you can then respond always in a professional, respectful manner, but be direct with them to try to work through whatever that tough, situation or undiscussable thing might be. And I've seen some movement there in the chat. Yep, counterfeit behaviors, enabling the issues to continue instead of going to the source. It's a good point. Denial can be an easy coping mechanism. And yep, question about reality. So yep, it could be different for each person. Excuse me. Yeah, I mean, we have these different realities, right? We all have that perception. And, your perspective on something may be different than the teammate next to you. But I think being very real with what the circumstances are, what the conditions and contexts are, and what are the options to try to move that forward, right? So, I mean, yes, that's a point that's noted, that it can be a little bit different that sense of reality and how folks process and perceive things. But within the workplace and the team here, I mean, our agencies, our departments, we have commitments, we have goals and projects that we are very clearly needing to try to address and move forward. Oh, excellent. I see the chats continuing. Yep, Bridget, I see that you've shared that image before in a different setting, and yes, very, very impactful. So yeah, I really appreciate this. And you know, as I was going through this content myself, I too was like, oh, you know, counterfeit behaviors, that really makes me stop and think, you know, wow, it's like even if somebody might have that good intention, right? Maybe they, due to the circumstance, they might unintentionally be exhibiting some sort of a counterfeit behavior. And that would require growth on their end, of course. But really, for today's session, we really want to explore these topics so that way we can start to identify on our teams and in our workplaces, you know, when not only when things are flowing in a high trust state, but also those behaviors and how they can either help build trust or potentially erode. And yeah, feel free to throw any other thoughts in the chat there. Covered a lot of ground so far. So we've talked about the formula, we've talked about the behaviors. One more question here that I want to just pose to you, and I'll go back and try to get a couple of the insights from the chat too. But the question that I want to pose to you all who are listening is this. You could be working with someone who is trustworthy. Maybe they do have that credibility. They exhibit trustworthy behaviors. You've seen it. Maybe you've experienced it in other settings. And yet you might still not trust them. Why might that be? You know, they got the credibility. They've been doing some good behaviors that you've seen or you feel confident about. But yet you might not trust them. Why? Yeah, feel free to throw something in the chat there. Gut feeling. Yep, vibes. Definitely, Amy. Others, feel free to throw in a thought there of why you might not be willing to still trust that person. Okay, my own hangups. Yep, Deborah. Gut feeling, behaviors are faked, fear. What others may have said, yep. Well, that's the thing, is that before we can extend trust to others, trust does start and is built from the inside out, right? So it does start with us and ourselves, the internal first, as we navigate this life, right? We've had past experiences. I see you, Lashara. So yeah. So what the Speed of Trust book then explores, you know, as we try to navigate how we begin and we can and should trust others, the way they frame this is through what's called a propensity to trust. So each of us has a propensity to trust, and that's our tendency, our willingness to trust others. And y'all in the chat are spot on. Past experiences. And yep, feel free to throw in any other thoughts to that. But what kinds of things influence or can influence your propensity to trust? So lack of rapport to back it up. Past experiences. Yep. Past experiences unrelated to them. I like that. So I think y'all are spot on with that. We have these different lived experiences. We've had these different environments that we've existed in. Okay, our relationships, our interactions, the culture of whatever sort of space you may have navigated before. And so many other things too. I mean, what kind of messages are you consuming if you don't have direct, you know, connection to that particular person or community? So there's a wide variety of influences that can have an impact on our willingness and our tendency to trust others. So I say that just because, in posing the question of, Why does all this matter? Why is there a formula for this? Why is there a framework for this? We talked about behaviors. We talked about, our willingness and tendency to trust others and extending that trust. Why does this matter? Well, with not only for a happy, healthy, well-being and a productive life, right? But within the confines here of a workplace, that trust can affect the speed and the costs of the work we do. So there's some very tangible ripples here that come from the trust that we are cultivating. And so if we view this in the framework of, kind of like a tax or a dividend, if we think of a tax like us having to like maybe pay in something and end up with less than we had started out with, versus a dividend where we get something back to us and it's like a benefit to us, right? Well, with trust and the speed of trust in that book, they frame that as a trust tax and there's a trust dividend. So to talk through that for a second, a trust tax, for example, is when the sense of trust in a team or a workplace environment is low. There's low trust. Well, the speed in which we advance our work suffers. It slows. We might be uncertain. We might be doubtful. We might be questioning, is this the correct process or pathway to achieving our goal? And then that's connected to the cost, not just financial costs, but yes, dollars are involved with that, with our time, with our capacity. We could be focused on other things. And then social and emotional costs, because you do navigate these things. You navigate work every day. And so that can have an impact on any professional. Now, on the flip side, the dividends, our speed increases because, hey, there's more clarity. There's more decisions being made. More actions can then stem from that. And then the costs can decrease because we end up being more efficient and we have that higher productivity. And let's see. So, yep, I see a couple questions here. I want to come back to that question because it's a very good one there, Amy, about how do we apply these ideas when others on a team can ignore or push back on ideas or saying things to make them look like they're trying, but it might be one of those counterfeit behaviors. So I want to circle back to that real quickly because, when we talk about trust taxes, and you can, and we have a poll question if you want to do that real quick, Christy, and then we'll move past that. But to kind of get us all thinking of some of these things, some examples of trust taxes, I want y'all to click on which of these trust taxes have you experienced when working on a team. That number is okay. Pretty quickly there. Yep, disengagement. You're disengaged from the things, or maybe you're doing just enough. Silos. You're stuck in just a silo of the same thing, and there's maybe different silos within a team, which shows the divisions. So okay, so excellent. Y'all responded to that one. Now, with trust dividends, Christy, what I'll do is yep, put that poll on there. And on the flip side, wanted to just share with you some of the potential dividends. If you have experienced any of those, go ahead and click on the ones that you may have familiarity with. Yeah, high productivity, engagement, and inspiration. Okay, that one's in the lead currently. Excellent. So more are coming in, but looks like that engagement and inspiration. And that's an important one because a lot of us tend to feel more energized and more excited about coming into work every day and tackling the projects that we have when we feel that engagement inspiration is present there, and that's a trust dividend, right? A lot of us, especially those who are involved with hiring and hiring panels and things of that nature, the topic of retention comes up and turnover, and again, yeah, when there's turnover, a high turnover rate, people leave, then you have to go back and start a process again, right? And try to bring in others and try to get them up to speed to whatever the team needs from them. So again, I mean, this framework can be helpful in just kind of distinguishing the taxes or the dividends, what's going to be something that's taxing to you and your team versus what's something that is generating some sort of a dividend or benefit to you. So what we're about to do is go into breakout sessions here. And again, if you're not able to, totally understand. But this is an opportunity to dive deeper. We're going to maybe spend about 4 or 5 minutes here. But what we want to do is have you all explore a question here. And I want to say this out loud with you all before we get you into the teams here, the breakouts. But I want you all to think of a time when someone either built or broke your trust at work. What specific behaviors did they demonstrate? How did it impact your ability to work with them? And what were those trust taxes or trust dividends that followed? Okay, so Christy, are you in a place where you can get us in a few minutes into some breakout rooms?
Yep, I sure am. I'm going to get that started while people kind of ponder this question and get ready to have the conversation. And I'm going to put people into breakout rooms of about 4 people. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and create the rooms now, and you should automatically find yourself in a space with others.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm so sorry that we are running short on time, and I didn't mean to interrupt your different conversations, whether they were off of a mic or through the chat. Appreciate y'all being flexible with the technology. Want to close things out and also offer if anyone wants to stick around after 1 o'clock to talk through any questions. But I do want to encourage everybody to check out the upcoming Lunch and Learns that we're going to have, HR Insights on June 11th. So next week, navigating the Americans with Disabilities Act and what you really need to know. And there are some upcoming Elevate Your Impact sessions. And then I know time is about over, but I do want to encourage everybody to fill out a feedback survey. And then I want to hold space to address some of the questions that may have come up on the chat that we didn't yet get to talk through. So again, if you have to run, I ask that you please fill out the survey if you can. If you take a picture on your device, you should be able to see that. And then I also want to hold space for any questions, including one of the questions that were asked earlier. Okay, and it's 1 o'clock right now. These are recorded, and you should have access to viewing that afterwards. Whew, okay, that time goes quickly. So if anyone has any additional questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. I do want to go back to Amy's question earlier about, these sorts of sessions are always, fun, but what do we do when teams, when there's pushback, and maybe someone or multiple folks on the team might not be addressing, those sorts of things or exhibiting some of those behaviors that are counterfeit or opposite. A lot of this does stem from, and it's not maybe a flashy answer, but it's modeling these things and trying to build that critical mass with other members of the team. And I'll just throw out my thoughts, and I definitely want to hear from others too. But with this sorts of things, in my experience, they tend to be infectious, right? They tend to be infectious, these sorts of behaviors, and at least when we can start to, even if it's small things, build that momentum, others can start to say, oh, well, this person, I really liked how that person said that thing, or wow, our leader, our supervisor, our director, I really like how they did that. Leadership does have a big part in setting the tone for the culture of trust, really. But to me, it's just continuing to model and be intentional with modeling and communicating and honoring when somebody does something that you find helpful. it can hopefully swing things in a way where it's growing trust and not eroding trust. But those are just my thoughts. I can open it up to others.
RJ, I think we also have another question. Maybe Angela has a question, and I want to make sure that we do have a book winner. So I want to make sure we leave time for that too, but it's already 2 after.
Yep.
Angela, do you want to come off mute and ask your question? Or maybe pop it in chat because it looks like you're off mute, but we're not hearing you.
Oh, sorry, I must have accidentally clicked something.
I'm
good.
Oh, okay. Okay, well, RJ, can I announce the book winner? And that way, if
Yes.
people need to jump off the call, they feel free to do that.
Sounds good.
Okay, is Marianne still here? Because you gave us a good drum roll last time, Marianne, that we had a drawing, and I feel like we need that again. But the winner is Elizabeth Thompson. Congratulations. You are the winner of our Speed of Trust book. So I'll be in contact with you and we'll get this book to you. Okay? Thanks, Marianne.
Great. Well, thank you all very much for joining today. Appreciate you participating in this session and look forward to having you join us in upcoming ones. Enjoy your rest of your day.